All right, and we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to A New Crusade. Today, I'm here talking with Jeff Putnam. He is an adventure author, a Catholic, as well as a ghostwriter based on his quick X bio. I have not talked or listened to a lot of interviews with Jeff in the past, so I'm going in kind of with no knowledge. I was hoping I might be able to get some more unique stuff out of it that way. The only interviews I had ever heard you give, Jeff, was a little bit like the first 20, 30 minutes from the Avoiding Babylon interview you did right after your house got hit by the hurricane.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just under a year ago. Would you mind introducing yourself to everyone?
Yeah, sure. Like the name on the screen says, I'm Jeff Putnam, uh, full-time writer, author, uh, married to the same woman for over half my life. We've got 9 kids, 8 boys, 1 girl. Spent most of my life doing blue-collar work until I decided I got, I guess you could say, sick and tired of working for someone else that I felt was less smart than me. So started my own company back in 2018. It did really well. I sold it in 2022. Yeah, sold it in 2022 and just took up writing full time.
Awesome. What so so you started off doing the blue collar stuff. Did you start that immediately like out of graduating high school, or what was kind of the process for that like?
No, I'm from a really small town, and it's one of those small towns where there's only 2 things to do there. One of them is methamphetamines, and the other one is dye.
Hmm.
So if I didn't join the military, I never would have got out of there. So I enlisted at 17, which was just a year or so right after 9/11.
Okay. What branch did you enlist in?
I was in the Army,
Oh, okay. And then how long did you do there?
just about 3 years.
Okay.
It was a short enlistment.
Got it. And so when you got out, then you started.
Yeah, well, kind of. Well, I met my wife while I was in the Army, and she was from out west, and I'm from here in South Carolina. So we moved to the Southwest, and I did some construction jobs out there. And then I was bored, and I saw that they had an opening in the Department of Health. Now, mind you, I didn't technically graduate high school. I had an Army recruiter enroll me into a correspondence school, and then he took the test and got the certificate so I could go ahead and enlist. Um, but that got me into college that I dropped out of. Money and grades were the reason I dropped out of college. It was just, I don't know. I don't know if I was bored with it or I just didn't agree with most of the crap. I failed sociology like 3 times, so I guess that's a badge of honor for anybody who's mildly conservative. But college just wasn't for me. But I'm not by any means dumb. I took a 6-week crash course and took the state licensing test and got my nursing license. And so I
Okay.
worked in healthcare for a little bit and worked in the New Mexico State Veterans Home. I worked in a hospital ICU for a while, and I just kind of got burnt out on that.
Hmm.
But I grew up in the South, you know, bucking hay for the horses and the cows and because I lived in a place that was literally named after a barn. So I, horses, cows, livestock, any kind of blue collar construction, stuff like that. So I ended up being a general contractor for about 10 years. Did that and then moved back out here to South Carolina back in 2014, 2015, one of those. And I got a job in automotive manufacturing. And so I was helping build I was not really helping build anything. It was more of a quality control and process engineering job for BMW because
Okay.
we have the BMW factory here. So I did that for 6 years. And while I was waiting for a truck to come in one night, because I had to inspect some defective stuff that was coming off, I heard these 2 guys talking, and one of them was like, "Oh yeah, can't wait till next week. I'm retiring from this place. And they'd been there for 28 years. And like, I can't do this for another 22 years. I can't.
Mm-hmm.
So that was probably around a September, October-ish. By December, I had an idea that I was going to, start my own company. March the following year, I launched the company. So that was 2019. I stayed at my job while running the company. And then June of 2020, COVID hit. And you're not sticking me with a needle. I'm not going to wear a mask in a factory that's 127 degrees and you're cutting the AC off because you think the virus travels through the vents. So you can either deal with me not wearing the mask or you can fire me. So they fired me.
Mm-hmm.
But since then, I never worked for anyone else. Ran my company, started a side gig to my now main gig, which was copywriting. I did a lot for different ad agencies and a couple of Web3 companies back when the Web3 tech boom was going on. I wrote, big 70, 80 page white pages for startups and stuff like that. And then sold that company in 2022. I think that's what I said. Maybe 2023. 2022. That's when I sold it and just went to writing full time.
Got it. When in that process did you have your first kid?
Oh, man. I had my first kid when I was 19.
Oh, okay.
So I'm like, my youngest is 10.
Okay, got it. So
Right.
you were moving that whole time, all from the bouncing around with. So you had your kids the whole time.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So what specifically, where along then? So you said you do the copywriting, but at what point was the copywriting kind of like I like writing and this is just the way I make money right now? Was there a point where you kind of realized, well, I want to do something more creative? Where in there did you kind of make that shift?
Well, I was that kid that I loved reading. So if I wasn't forced to work as a child, helping with like, oh, this neighbor's got corn that needs help harvesting, or, hey, we need to go and dump some round bales in the pasture over here. I mean, I was 10 years old driving a 5-speed Ford Ranger through the pasture, dropping 3-stringers. But I always had a book. I love to read. And if there was nothing going on and I had an opportunity to be in the house reading, I would do it. My mom would tell me, you need to go outside and do something. I'm tired of you being in the house. This is 80s and 90s, right? So I would stick the book under my shirt, go outside, sit under the tree, and read there. And I believe it was around my sophomore or junior year in high school, I was doing a book report because I've always loved reading and I always wondered how they put those stories together. I was doing a book report on Ernest Hemingway. And I went to the public library, had to pay 10 cents per copy printed out. You're probably too young to remember that.
Yeah, didn't have to do that.
You don't remember any of that.
No.
But I saw a picture of Ernest Hemingway on a boat. There's a typewriter there. There's a bottle of whiskey there. And he had a machine gun in his hand. And the caption said that he was shark hunting. And I thought, if that's what a writer does, that would be a great job.
Yeah.
I get to drink on a boat and hunt sharks with machine guns. To this day, I've never gone shark hunting with a machine gun, but there's still time. I haven't given up hope. I'm a dreamer. But I think when I started my company, in 2018 and I launched it in 2019, I burned through every single dime that we had in savings. My wife wasn't happy about that, but I mean, it worked out. But at the time when I'm like, I don't have any money left, I just need to sell something. I need customers. And well, to get customers, you need advertising, but I couldn't afford to pay an advertising agency, a marketing agency. So I had to learn copywriting. And then I started generating, I got really good at copywriting because I was doing really well with my business. And so other people were struggling with copywriting. And I'm like, hey, bro, hire me. I'm cheaper than that guy because I'm just doing it to help my company. But who doesn't love more money? Started doing that and realized I could charge a hell of a lot more. Started charging more, and that kind of became the thing. And it was around 2020 that I released my first 2 books. They're nonfictions. They're no longer for sale. I think you can still find 1 or 2 of them on like Walmart.com, maybe Target. I know for sure one of them's in Walmart.
Mm-hmm.
But I really liked writing, but I'd never written fiction for myself. I've ghost written fiction for other people, but I never had a story that I just wanted to turn into something in a fiction book myself until February of this year. So it's kind of weird how that timing was.
So when you're doing ghostwriting, like when you say you've ghostwritten for fiction for other people, like you literally wrote an entire fiction book and then someone else just put their name on it, or what's the process for that?
That's pretty much what it is.
Okay.
It depends on the level of what they come to me with. Like I work with Kristen McTiernan. She's at Kristen_fiction on X. She's kind of like my publisher editor boss, and she has an agency and she gets ghostwriting clients all the time, but she's got so much work. There's me and I think 4 other staff writers that she'll just hand off projects to.
Got it.
Before that, I was doing it solo, but I just said, you know what? She's a great editor. She's a great author. You know, she's a great person, really. And she doesn't seem like a shady business owner. So when I saw that she was looking for other writers, I threw my hat in the ring. Fortunately, my reputation preceded me because I had a couple of big successes that, you know, were like, if you got Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights at number 2, my book was at number 3 that I had ghostwritten or co-written. So I kind of rode that success on into a couple of gigs. But most of the time they'll come and say, I want a story. This is what I want it to be about. And I've got a basic outline of how I want the story to go or a premise of the story. I've got characters, and sometimes they don't, but sometimes they're like, I have characters and this is how I want it to go. I just got done outlining a 5-book series for a guy that he's going to be wanting a ghostwrite for. So I know exactly how all of those books are going to go. And so I'll probably be writing them one by one. But sometimes I had a romance novel that a woman needed written. And I think this was her 2nd or 3rd in her series. And they're all kind of standalone books. And so it was your typical, you know, young American woman gets stranded in a foreign country, meets a handsome local who works, you know, some random blue collar job. And it turns out he's super rich. You know, it's a Hallmark movie on paper.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I had to develop the story and all of the characters for those. So it just depends on the job.
That makes sense. I had seen, there was an author I used to like, and he had, I think his big break had been co-writing the UFC champion. Oh my goodness, how am I forgetting? Matt Hughes. He wrote like co-wrote his autobiography with him. So I had heard of like the co-writing stuff, but I wasn't exactly sure how the ghostwriting stuff, because to me it makes sense that a UFC champion would be incapable of writing a book anyone would want to read on his own. And so
a lot of head injuries. So
yeah, exactly. So it makes sense that you would utilize someone in that way. But I was curious. That's really interesting to me. So people just want a story that they want put forward, and then
but they don't know how to turn it into a book.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So I guess it's like if they wanted a specific house built and they didn't know how to make the house actually come together, and then they would hire you.
Same thing. They know it. They need wood, plaster, concrete, plumbing, but they don't know how to put it together.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's interesting. So at what point did you have enough writing experience that you kind of took on the first job doing an actual book? Or had you done your own first? Did you do your own books first and then get into the ghostwriting whole books for people? I'm curious what that was.
I did my own first. And I mean, to date, I've written right around 115, 118 books. 7 of them are feature-length books, right? But those are for myself. But I also have written, I don't know, a few dozen small 18 to 20,000 word ebooks for myself. But I had all of that under my belt before someone else came to me and said, hey, you're writing a lot of these books. Who's writing them for you? Do you have a ghostwriter, or could you help me write one? And so I did a couple of co-writing jobs, and then I had some that started off as co-writing jobs, but then they just stopped wanting to be co-written and said, can you just do the rest?
Mm-hmm.
And so once I'd finished that, I was like, yeah, sure, I'll just full on ghostwrite some books. And so that became part of my whole offer.
That makes sense. So I'm curious, growing up, you said you like to read. What were some of your favorite authors to read, your favorite books growing up?
Man, I read my uncle's Clive Cussler books when I was, I want to say, somewhere between 7 and 12 in that area. I had the entire Hardy Boys set. You've probably never read a single Hardy Boys book because you're young.
I owned a lot of them that my grandpa gave me, but I never read them.
Okay. Yeah. Makes me feel a whole lot better that your grandfather owned them and gave them to you. But it was Hardy Boys. It was the Clive Cussler books. Some Tom Clancy books were okay. And it was really anything I could get my hands on. But the Hardy Boys, man, I loved those.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. What about these days? I'm curious, do you still do a lot of reading? Are you mainly focused on
yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 5 bookcases in the living room. I've got 3 in the hallway. And I still have a stack of books on my floor over here next to my desk. I've got 2 stacks of books on that small table over there on the other side of the room. And those are just mine. My wife has hers too. I mean, I read everything I can get my hands on.
What do you like these days?
It depends. I mean, as a Catholic, I read a lot of books on Catholicism, but I still like fiction because can you imagine a chef that never tried new foods?
Yeah, obviously not.
Right? Mm-hmm. I used to tell people all the time, you cannot create if you don't consume. If you're not good at storytelling, bro, get a Netflix account. Watch Netflix. That's how you learn what good storytelling is. And I'll read everything from fiction to nonfiction, autobiographies, biographies. But I think the one that I just recently finished was I finished for the second time, is Manhunters. It's by Steve Murphy and Javier Pena, who are actually friends of mine. And they're the 2 DE agents that they made the Narcos series on Netflix about, the ones that took down Pablo Escobar. Turns out when I had an old podcast several years ago, a buddy of mine works in an R&D sales department for law enforcement technology. And he travels all over the country selling equipment and non-lethal stuff to different police departments all over the country. And so he knew Steve Murphy and Javier Pena. And then, so it was like 1 degree of separation. And he introduced me to them. And they were like, yeah, sure, we'll come on your show and talk. Will you promote our book? We'll send you a free copy. That a guy who knows a guy, and the whole network strength thing.
Well, that's nice. I'm curious, so what are kind of the main inspirations, or for someone who hasn't read any of your Cole Harper books, what would you kind of compare them to?
Well, I got the idea for Cole Harper. I was sitting on the couch one weekend. It was boring, nothing to do. And I went on a movie binge and I watched all 3 of the original Indiana Jones movies. And then I watched the first 2 in the Brendan Fraser, The Mummy series. And Rick O'Connell, Brendan Fraser, he is very much like Cole Harper, but the adventures that he goes on are very much like Indiana Jones.
Got it. Yeah.
That weekend movie binge is where I got the idea, because I was like, I want more movies like this. But if you go scrolling through any of the 50 streaming options that are out there, there's hardly any adventure movies. I mean, I got to go back and watch, Romancing the Stone with Michael Douglas,
Mm-hmm.
or Jewel of the Nile, the sequel to that one. Or I got to go all the way further back, and I'm looking at Alan Quartermain movies. You can't find good adventure books.
Mm-hmm.
Sahara was probably the last decent one that was based off of, the gritty pulp adventurer, Dirk Pitt, written by Clive Cussler.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, we need more characters like this. And so I ended up making one.
Yeah, Black Monk says the Mummy over Indiana Jones, and then he says sorry because he knows Indiana Jones is my favorite. So I think Indiana Jones might be my favorite trilogy of movies, period. So I've liked
tell everyone that I keep a picture of my grandmother and my grandfather. There we go.
There you go.
Right there.
That's awesome.
Over here.
Yeah, I like those ones a lot. I went through the original 3. My fiance had never seen them, and in the last month we did 3 weekends in a row. We watched one each weekend, and now she likes those a lot too. So I'm really excited about that because those are my favorite. Man, those ones I probably watch them. I probably watch the whole original 3 series probably like 2 times a year. I'll just go through it every so often. And I do agree there's no adventure stuff. There's the Mummy. The National Treasure movies with Nick Cage are like kind of adventure.
Those are pretty good. Those are pretty good. I don't care what anybody says about, they're Disney, whatever. They did well with those. Me and my son love watching them, my youngest. Yeah. But everything else is sci-fi, fantasy. Now, don't get me wrong. I love sci-fi movies. Holy crap. Give me a sci-fi movie all day. Mm-hmm. But I could never get into the sci-fi books. I think I did read a couple of them as a kid that were like in the Xenomorph series.
Okay, yeah.
But I just could never get into them. And an Indiana trilogy ranking from each of us. All right,
you go first.
I'll go first. Well, every Indiana Jones fan knows that Temple of Doom is a prequel to Raiders. And you've got Indy a little darker, a little less knowledgeable, a little more pulp. But I'm still going to say that it would have to be, with best being Last Crusade. Second is going to be Raiders. Third is going to be Temple of Doom. But the Kingdom of a Crystal Skull or Legend of the Crystal, whatever the hell it is. And what was that other one?
Dial of Destiny.
Okay, that one.
Yeah.
Dial of Destiny doesn't exist. And I'm going to be the contrarian here and say that the one with Shia the Meat is going to rank 4th, but it's a valid Indiana Jones movie.
Mm-hmm. I actually agree. It sounds like I'm copying you, but I agree. I think that one of the things I don't like about Raiders of the Lost Ark is that a lot of like the desert, they're in the desert for a second time. So it makes it feel very similar. So it's in some ways it's cool because it's like a spiritual successor to the first one, but it would be nice to see something a little bit more unique. I mean, it was nice to see, I think where do they go? Venice in it. And so that's kind of nice to see like a different area, but a lot of it's in the desert. But I feel like Sean Connery just makes that movie. It's so him playing.
It was even stranger that they're only like 7 years difference in age.
Oh, are they really? I didn't even know that. That's funny.
They were like, I think it might have been like maybe 12. I don't know, but Sean Connery was not that much older than Harrison Ford.
That's funny. I didn't know that, but I think I really like him in that movie. But then, alternatively, I think that Miriam as the best Indiana Jones girl is the best in that first movie. So I agree. I think Raiders of the Lost Ark is the best. Or sorry, Last Crusade's the best. Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then I go back and forth because I think that the story in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull just kind of sucks, and it's not. The communists are not as good of a villain, and they're not as interesting. But I like Shia LaBeouf a lot, so I actually like his character. It's fun to see Indiana Jones a little bit older. But yeah, I think Temple of Doom is better, as annoying as Willie constantly screaming is. But Temple of Doom also has Short Round in it, and he's an awesome character. I like him a lot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, I agree. The Mummy movies are really, really good. The National Treasure movies are good, but yeah, those are like, I mean, those are three big series, and that's about it as far as really big series go. There's not, I mean, they tried to revive some of them and tried to keep adding, and just nothing has done it quite the same.
Yeah, and beyond that, you've got the Tomb Raider movies, which those were super successful video game adaptations, which you can't deny those. They were. I actually liked the reboot Tomb Raider. I can't remember the chick's name, but I liked it because it was a little grittier, a little better of the origin story, a little pulpier, I guess. But if you're going for the straight, outrageous video game adaptation, the first two with Angelina Jolie were pretty good. But everything is a creature feature, a disaster flick, which I love disaster flicks. I don't know how many times I've watched like over and over again. I'll watch things like Dante's Peak, The Core, Deep Impact, all those, Armageddon. Those are great movies, But as far as adventures go, the most recent one that came out that was surprisingly decent was the one with John Krasinski, which was Fountain of Youth on Apple TV.
I don't think I've seen that. I'll have to look into that.
It's Cole Harper, baby.
Oh, is it? It's very similar.
Yeah, he can't fly a plane, but he's got the snark.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, I think it's from a practical perspective, I think one of the issues is that a lot of those movies are probably more middle of the road budget wise. And I think it's probably, if you're not spending like $1 billion on a movie, it's probably pretty hard to get it off the ground. Although I imagine they find ways to spend tons of money in Hollywood these days, no matter what, even if it's a slightly more grounded story. So I don't really know what the conspiracy is behind why there aren't more good ones, because there's tons of good books. Like, I'm surprised. I really like Louis L'Amour novels, and I'm surprised that there aren't more movie or show adaptations of his stories.
Well, I don't want to wax poetic here, but nearly every action movie is a Western. Nearly every action movie is a Western, as far as the theme goes. We had Westerns as the quintessential American piece of cinema, or literature, as far as our culture goes. But if you look at any action movie ever made, even let's look at, Rambo First Blood, that is a Western. That is Pale Rider. That is the outlaw Josie Wales. Every single, or it's got some kind of, homage to Akira Kurosawa, Seven Samurai, which is where they got the Magnificent Seven.
So what do you see from a structure perspective as like being the difference between something like a Western and something like a more action? Because I don't think I've watched adventure. I've watched lots of adventure movies, but I don't think I've read a lot of adventure books. So I'm curious, from like a structural perspective, what do you see as being fundamental differences?
Well, with a Western, you're going to always have the bad guy is leagues up here with your protagonist way down here, right? And that's just it maintains that structure the entire time, and it's just the underdog overcoming the big guy, right? With adventure stories, you have a little bit of give and take. So there's a rule when you're writing or creating an adventure film: the problem that needs to be solved has a solution, but this solution should cause another problem. And so, for example, if you look in Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's an adventure movie, right? Indiana Jones finds the headpiece of Ra, and then he finds where the Ark of the Covenant is. But then next thing you know, he's thrown into a pit of snakes. And then the Nazis take it and they get away. And before that, hey, we're here. We know what we're doing. And then Marion is kidnapped and he thinks she's dead.
Mm-hmm.
So every time he gets a little bit ahead, another problem happens. And then, hey, I found Marion. Now we're in another problem. An adventure movie is constant up and down. I solved this problem. Now there's another that happened because the solution to the previous problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of a yo-yo all the way to the end.
That makes a lot of sense. That's very clear in Indiana Jones. It's constantly like he solves the problem and then, oh no, and then something,
because he solved that problem, he caused another one, and then he has to solve that one. And then the problem or the solution to this problem was the final solution to the major problem, even though it caused a problem previously.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So as far as when you're designing the story for the Cole Harper books,
I don't design them.
Okay, what do you do then? What's your process there?
There's two different kinds of writers. You've got plotters and you've got pantsers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And pantsers are you fly by the seat of your pants.
Mm-hmm.
When I got the idea for the first Cole Harper book, The Last Nazi, I just had an image in my head of Cole Harper sitting in a bar in Havana, and this beautiful MI6 agent comes walking up to him. She knows he's a smuggler. He's like, it's kind of curious that you've done your homework and you know who I am and you know I'm a smuggler because I don't work with people I don't know. And she's like, I need you to smuggle something to London and you'll get paid for it. But then he gets wrapped up in her problems because the Nazis are after her. And the MacGuffin is, of course, the Spear of Destiny. The Spear of Longinus, pierce Christ's side.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very Indiana Jones-esque there, right? Nazis are after the beautiful woman who's got the map to the Spear of Destiny, and they're trying to kind of race to it. He didn't go into it looking for it. He was just hired to do a job, and then her problems came after him. That's the only thing I knew about it.
Mm-hmm.
That was the entire concept of the book when I started writing. They're just going to go after this Spear of Destiny.
So you had that idea and then you plot it out, or you're literally writing chapter by chapter, deciding what's happening?
Writing chapter by chapter as I go. I'll sit here and I've got my whiteboard with a bunch of stuff listed down on it. That's listed for book 6 for the Vatican heist, the one I'm working on now. And I have no idea what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea who's going to die. I have no idea who's going to survive. I have no idea where they're going next, but it just has to make logical sense. So what I'll do is, what's the worst thing that could happen right now? Cole Harper and Evelyn Shaw are on a train on their way to Tangier to go and figure out these glyphs on this map. Mm-hmm. Oh, great. The Nazis are on the train. They got captured. They got thrown off the damn train. Mm-hmm. Now they're stuck in the desert. They were on the way there. What's the worst thing that could happen? Nazis catch them. Now they're stuck in the middle of the desert. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, okay, so what happens next? And as you can see, I've got all this up here. I make sure the geographical locations are all correct. So it's not like, well, they walked for 10 minutes from Casablanca and they were in Tangier. It's not like that.
Yeah. Okay.
But I just figure it out as I go. And then somewhere around the 20th or so chapter, I start going, all right, how are we going to solve this? We got to get to the big showdown. Mm-hmm. But I have no idea how it's going to end until I end it. I don't do any outlining or any plotting.
So do you have, I guess, in the structure? So so you're 5 books in?
Mm-hmm.
So you're not planning it, but I'm sure looking back, you can see a structure that exists, right? Or are they, I guess, do you, like when you see a James Bond movie or when you watch an Indiana Jones movie, like in the structure, there's like the girl that he interacts with for the, either one of those characters for the movie, right? And so I'm curious, like I've only read the first book. So in the first book, that's there. Is that a similar part that's in the Cole Harper series? Is that something that's explicitly there? I'm curious, kind of as far as incorporating kind of iconic elements, how do you work with that?
Well, I'm a misogynist, so there's always a damsel that he has as a sidekick. Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Evelyn's doing a great. Hey, it's not bad for a girl. You hit that guy pretty good. Mm-hmm. It was the same in the Tomb of the Jaguar King, which was book 2. Mm-hmm. It was the same in Plague of the Pharaohs. It was the same in The Lost Expedition. And it was the same in Legend of the Buzzard Cipher, book 5 that just came out last month. Some things do change up. I've got recurring characters in all of them. There's a smuggler friend his name's Malik. I guess you could say he is Cole Harper's Salah, to Indiana Jones. And I guess you could say that Catalina, and I don't know if you've found her yet in the first book.
I don't think so.
But she's kind of his Marion Ravenwood.
Okay.
Right? She's never there, but she's always there. Right? Even though if he's flying across the globe with another woman, Catalina's kind of always in the background because Catalina is a broker. She puts together the deals for people who do what Cole Harper does as a smuggler. And they have a history. And so those two characters recur throughout the series.
That makes sense. What are what have been your favorite locations to write for? I'm curious, I personally, when I think of places that really kind of capture my mind or capture my heart, there's a couple places that really latch on to me. I'm curious, have you kind of written that into the stories? Have you explicitly, does it just occur to you, oh, this would be an interesting country, and then that's what you run with? I'm curious how deciding the locations for the adventures has worked.
Well, most of the time what I do is I'll pick my MacGuffin, so the MacGuffin is the thing that they're after to either get before the enemy gets or keep away from the enemy, right? So the Ark of the Covenant was the MacGuffin in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and the Holy Grail, Last Crusade, the little magic rocks in Temple of Doom.
Yeah.
Whatever those things were called, I can't remember.
Yeah.
So I'll start with those. And I'm a history documentary nerd. I don't know if you've ever seen any of his shows. Expedition Unknown with Josh Gates.
I've heard of them, but I haven't seen them.
I've seen every single episode at least 4 times of all 14 seasons. And there's always something in there that I go, that's interesting. Because the cool thing about history is when you're writing adventure history like what I write, history isn't always neat and tidy. So let's look at the Hanjo Masamune. The Hanjo Masamune is the sword that belonged to the Tokugawa clan. Once the Tokugawa shogunate began, and they maintained peace in Japan for 200 years. The last remaining Tokugawa descendant to hold and possess the Hanjo Masamune, which there's a whole cool legend behind the story that the story chose, the sword chose him way back in, I think it was the 1400s or 18, whatever it was. But they, after the Allies won in World War II, part of the conditional surrender of Japan was that all of these Japanese families had to give up their swords and surrender them to Allied troops. The last member at that time, member of the Tokugawa family, was the interior minister for Japan. And there's paperwork that says he turned in the Hanjo Masamune to this certain police station. And then a soldier that either used a fake name or wasn't really a soldier signed it out as, I've taken this into my possession, as a spoil of war kind of thing. Like MacArthur had 4 or 5 samurai swords that he was given, right? But since World War II, the Hanjo Masamune, the sword that is said to hold inside of it the spirit of Japan itself, has been missing. So what happened to it? Did the Japanese Imperial Army realize what it was and hide it somewhere in all of those Imperial tunnels that haven't been explored yet because they're dangerous and they've caved in? Because there's a lot of supplies that have never been recovered from that period because these tunnels collapsed. Because they had a plan, if there was ever an invasion, they would get the imperial government system and hide them in these tunnels.
Mm-hmm.
Did a soldier really take it and the Hanjo Masamune's here in America? Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But the what if about it is what makes it so easy to wrap a story around. What if the Hanjo Masamune was spirited away to the mountains of Japan because the hamon, and the hamon on a sword is the forge marks, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if that was in the same shape that if you stood in the exact spot on a mountain range on a Japanese island, the hamon would match up, and at the end of the hamon, that's where the Tokugawa treasure was.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they're hunting after the Hanjo Masamune.
Okay.
There's so many what ifs, and that's what I do with all of my stories. So if I pick a location, it has to make sense for my MacGuffin.
Yeah, that makes sense. So then I'm just going to keep referencing because this is what I know the best. So like in Indiana Jones, whatever the final location is, he's often starts somewhere else. Do you try to do that? Is that something that's important? Do you think it's okay to have like an adventure story where it's just in one place? You know, in National Treasure, for example,
the second book is like that. The second book is like that. The third book is like that, even though he starts off in one spot in Egypt, he just goes all over Egypt.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. The fourth one, he's in Casablanca. He goes to the Himalayas.
Mm-hmm.
And the fifth one, he's in France, and he ends up all the way out in this tiny little island tip chain right over here below the Maldives called the Seychelles. He ends up over there just off the coast of Madagascar.
Okay.
So, I mean, it just depends on where the story's going.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oh man, I lost my train of thought with what you were saying. You were saying, oh man, that's a bummer. I had something good and I totally lost it. So I'm curious when you're, oh, okay, I remember. So the stories are serialized, I would imagine, based like they're not just like completely what is the term?
Like standalones?
Yeah, that, or I know there's a term, I'm forgetting what it's called when you release, like you're telling one story, but you're telling it at different points.
They're all linear. They're all linear,
okay,
right?
Yeah.
So the first one takes place in 1949, and the sixth one that I'm working on now is like 1953. So we're talking, Pope Paul VI, just after Vatican, or just before Vatican II, and you've got the communist Russians trying to undermine the Vatican. So everything is historically accurate. And there's just, like I said, the little elements of what ifs.
Yeah.
Right. However, you could read any of the Cole Harper novels in any order without having to have read the previous one to enjoy the first one. But if he goes, oh man, that reminds me of Malik, or, oh, there's Catalina. You're like, when the hell did Catalina come in? You have to go back and read those for the supporting characters, because not every recurring character is in every book. But if they're mentioned in that book, you're like, I don't know who the hell that is. You would have had to have read the previous one.
Got it. That makes sense. So then I remember where I wanted to go with that. So you do have it linear, but are you planning on kind of having an overarching narrative take place, or do you really just want to kind of, is it just each story just Cole in the story, kind of just keep adding them? Do you ever want to end it? Like, not that you might exclusively, but a lot of authors will kind of have a series, like you said, maybe it's just based on the different style. Maybe people like to plan out a big story arc or a character's development or something. I'm curious how you kind of think about that.
Well, for Cole Harper, I'm more looking at keeping it an open-ended series, very much like the Jack Reacher series. There's 30 Jack Reacher novels right now. He's 35 in the first one. He's almost 60 in the most recent one. So he ages in real time. Cole Harper ages in real time. He's got some scars. Eventually, his knees are going to be hurting, so he can't quite take that landing the way he did in the first book.
Hmm.
you know. And so I'm going to have it that same way. I am working on a secondary series. It's I'm calling it the Shattered Crown series. It's actually based off of one of my ancestors,
Hmm.
because my family, their original last name was de Turville, and they came to England with William the Conqueror during the Norman Conquest.
Hmm.
And obviously they overthrew the king, and Count Odo of France followed over. Count Odo was given a huge swath of land in what is now Buckinghamshire, England.
Hmm.
Well, he, I guess, was the landlord to my ancestors, who were given this acreage, and the acreage is called Puttenham, Puttenhm, which, if you say Puttenham really quickly, you get Putnam. That's how my
Okay.
last name came to be. And
Okay.
so I'm working on this series. Kristen told me that it was very much like Bernard Cromwell's The Saxon Stories, which was like the Last Kingdom and those. But obviously it's about 120 years later.
Hmm. Let's see. Black Monk said, "Your ancestors were homies. One branch was Dewarn, coming with William the Conqueror." There you go.
Nice.
I guess anyone from a close enough area should, and good enough genealogies should see some interconnectedness like that going back. Um, how have you liked or maybe disliked as the Cole Harper series has gone on? Kind of technology in the story will change. I'm curious, have you kind of enjoyed maybe, I mean, it's not like it's like 20 or 30 years quite yet, right? Where it's like all of a sudden he has to like have a pager or something, you know? Um,
Well,
maybe not as fantastical.
he's
I know.
29 years old in 1949. I don't think he's ever going to have a pager.
Yeah, that's fair. So I'm curious, how do you like kind of changing aging the story a little bit? Is that something that you kind of enjoy? Is it a lot to kind of deal with? I'm curious what you think about that.
I don't really have a problem with it. He's a smuggler. He's a thief. So most of the things he gets, he takes.
Hmm.
Right. Ooh, I like that plane. It's mine now.
Hmm.
You know, the twin beach that he flies, it was just an old rust bucket left over from the same kind of planes that he flew in World War II. Because he wasn't like an ace pilot or a ground pounding infantryman. He just flew transport planes, and then he got kicked out of the Army for smuggling. He's
Hmm.
not the chosen one, super secret squirrel guy.
Hmm.
You know, he's just a smart ass from Texas.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, that's interesting.
yeah, he takes everything that he gets his hands on. He's got a new plane now, which is a Grumman G-21 Goose. It's a seaplane.
Hmm.
I recently found out that's the same kind of plane that was in the Uncharted series that Sully used. So pretty cool. But
Interesting.
as far as technology goes, we didn't have a tech boom until the 80s. And I'm not really
Mhm.
concerned that Cole Harper is still going to be Cole Harpering in the 80s.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, you can
Yeah.
keep a pretty from a yeah, because I guess when is the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is what, the 50s or the 60s or something, the early 60s, I think. So
Right.
it.
And that's why you had the change in protagonist as well,
Mhm.
where I've got Soviets in some of my books because the Cold War was a thing.
Mhm. How do you like that? How have you enjoyed writing different antagonists? Is it fundamentally different to have to write the different antagonists? I'm curious because you obviously enjoy your protagonist. I'm curious what it's like having to come up with the different villains. Do you have recurring villains? What's your process with that?
I don't have any recurring villains. He does have a foil,
Hmm.
kind of the one guy that just keeps showing up. It's from his past. He debuted in book 4. It's an old army buddy that kind of betrayed him, but he couldn't kill him because, damn it, you were my army buddy.
Hmm.
Can't kill you, but I better not see you for a while, kind of thing. So he's going to be making some returns. But as far as creating the villains, I don't so much create them as I just look through history and see
Hmm.
who was there.
Hmm.
And I go, Yeah, he could have been involved. That a guy like that could have been involved with the same political motivations.
Hmm.
And I let history do the creating for me. I just fill in the blanks on the what ifs.
That makes sense. Do you ever use actual people, or do you mainly create like a story analog for someone if you find like someone inspired by someone particular?
I've never come across that yet.
Hmm.
I mean, if I had to name the president, I wouldn't be like, oh, there's President Charlie Pride or what. No, it's still going to be Eisenhower. There's still
Okay.
going to be real people in history, but I don't think I'll ever incorporate them directly into the story unless Cole Harper reads a newspaper article about a guy named Castro in the 60s.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Kind of as more as setting
He
for, or
exists in the real world,
yeah.
but he's not, it's not Assassin's Creed. He's not running around hanging out with George Washington or things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a funny combo. That's funny. So what I guess I lost my train of thought again. Sorry. What for the how has you said that the first MacGuffin is the spear that pierces Christ's side. I'm curious, to what extent do you purposefully integrate Catholic themes into your books or characters? Or you said there's a Vatican heist, so I'm sure that's part of it. To what extent is that purposeful for you? Does it just happen naturally? I'm curious how you feel about that.
I mean, Cole's Catholic.
Hmm.
He's not a very good Catholic. He shoots people, but he's
Hmm.
Catholic.
Hmm.
I think it's more of, if I look at I look at history and I say, obviously the Vatican holds the spear of Longinus, but what if they didn't? In the Vatican heist, the seamless garment has been stolen from the Vatican archives.
Hmm.
You know, the garment that Christ wore during his passion has been stolen by the Soviets, and the Soviets want to undermine the Vatican Church. I mean, we had Soviet infiltrators in the 50s going into the Vatican as priests and nuns. So the history matches.
Hmm.
But what they want more than anything else was to undermine the church. And so there's a story I can tell with that. And so
Hmm.
I'm not intentionally going, how can I Catholicize this
Hmm.
book? Because not everything has Catholic themes. There's no Catholic themes in the second, third, or fourth book.
Hmm.
I think it might be mentioned that Cole is Catholic in the fifth one. I'm not 100% sure. It might be. But as far as anything Christianity related, the first one and the sixth one that I'm working on right now are the only two.
So you're not really trying to like moralize or preach at people. You're really going story first, and anything that comes
You really
along.
should not try to get morals from Cole Harper.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
He's that guy that he has a line that he can't cross, right? There's a
Mhm.
damsel in distress. He's an old school, World War II vet misogynist. There's a pretty dame. She's getting bullied by a big, ugly dude. I gotta step in. I can't leave the little lady crying alone in the desert. I gotta at least get her to safety. And then he gets swept up into her problems, But he's not a good guy. He's a smuggler. He's not even allowed to go back to the U.S. He had to give up his citizenship to keep from being prosecuted by the U.S. government. He's
Mhm.
not a good guy.
Yeah.
He's like chaotic good, but
Mhm.
he's not doing it. He's not doing anything altruistically until he has no other choice. And then
Yeah.
it's really not that altruistic then anyway, because if he doesn't solve the problem, they're going to shoot him. So it's all self-interest.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, One last thing I wanted to ask. I saw someone commenting under, I think, one of your posts, maybe it was when you had announced your last book, and they were complaining at you about supposedly about having like AI covers on your books, and they were saying,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, why wouldn't you pay an artist? Why wouldn't you do this?" I, as a person, don't tend towards moralizing or complaining or browbeating or pearl clutching, anyways. So that just seemed annoying to me. but I could at least kind of I could understand what they were saying, even if I think they're annoying the way they said it. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that, and what's your reasoning for that, at least?
Well, my thoughts on that are I really don't care if they like it or not.
Yeah.
You know, don't buy the book. I don't care. Hundreds of other people are.
Yeah.
I'm sure I won't miss your $4 I get in royalties.
Mm-hmm.
But I write anywhere between 1 to 3 books per month in the Cole Harper series.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I wrote the first one in 2 weeks. I wrote 2 more the following month. I don't have the time to say, this is the kind of cover that I want. Let's say you're the artist.
Mm-hmm.
All right, man. I want this and this and this on the cover. You say, all right, give me a week. And then you draw it, you draft it, and then you send it to me and you go, what do you think? And I'm like, this is nothing like what I wanted. No, this needs to be this and this needs to be this. I'm not a visual artist kind of guy, so I can't really describe it to you, the way that it needs to be done outside of I need thematic elements within the composition, and I need Cole Harper to be more a part of the composition rather than the main feature of the cover.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I know to say.
Yeah.
And by that time, by the time you've done 1 or 2 iterations, I'm on another book. I need my cover, bro. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have time to go back and forth asking for iterations with an artist.
Yeah.
So I don't.
Mm-hmm.
They can't create as fast as I can write and publish, because I send my book to a couple of beta readers. They get it read in 3 days, and then they tell me everything that needs to be changed. I go in, I make the changes in real time as they're sending me screenshots where they've highlighted things. I make all those changes, and then I immediately upload to Amazon and I click publish. Within 72 hours, it's live and ready to go. I don't have time to go back and forth with an artist. If an artist wants me to hire them, they need to be a lot faster.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Especially, one of the funny things is you've talked a lot about kind of pulp stories, and that's where like Indiana Jones is inspired by. And obviously that's where a lot of the inspiration for your stuff comes from. I know, especially in the science fiction realm, a lot of those books started off being published in magazines. So you didn't even have a cover. It would just be, page 3 and 4 of the magazine are just a chapter from the book, or, a quarter of the magazine would just be like one of those short pulp novels, right? And so it from my perspective, I don't see an issue with it. Also, like you said, like if you have that big of an issue with it, you can just choose not to buy. But
and they say they try to make the argument, well, you're taking money out of an artist's pocket. You're taking food out of their mouths. Well, if they're that good, I'm not taking that much. Mm-hmm. And if they're not, maybe they should get a side job.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you're not. Yeah, you could sit there and argue with those people. There are some people who, especially
I don't argue with them. I just go, what's the Southern expression we use down here? Bless your heart. Basically just means you're an idiot, and I pity your parents. So that's where I leave it. I don't care. They can have a problem with it all they want to. They can be the purest starving artist if they want. I've got 9 kids to feed, bro. I don't have time for your crap.
Yeah, that makes sense. Last thing I want to ask you about, so you're really turning out at a high volume. What kind of is your routine for writing? Do you write at specific times? Do you have kind of a page limit, a word limit you try to get to every day? What's your process like for that?
Well, I usually get up around 5:15, and I'll grab my laptop off my desk and I'll take it to the living room, make some coffee, sit there. I'll write until about 7 or 9 ish, depending on when it's, summertime. Kids get up whenever they want. I'm not pushing them. Sit there on the couch with my wife, have some coffee while I'm writing, and then I'll come back here, do my client work, my ghost writing, my editing, my expanded edits and book launcher, running everything through, SEO keyword crap, do all that other for all my clients. And then hold on, got to pause this. I got an idea. And next thing you know, I'll sit here and write, and I look at the clock and it's 8 o'clock at night. I didn't mean to write this long, but I did. I just do that daily.
Okay. So you don't really have you just go till you're done. You don't really set like specific limits for yourself.
Yeah. And if my wife comes into the room and says, hey, we need to go to the store. Okay. I'll put a pin in it, go to the store, come back, start over again.
Got it. That makes sense. Was that something you Was that something that comes to you naturally? Is it something that you kind of had to learn to go that hard, go that fast?
Doing it. And I've got like obsessive compulsive where I can't leave something unfinished.
Mm-hmm.
And if I start it, I'll dream about it until it's done.
Got it.
Like I'll literally lay in my bed and I'll have dreams about what Cole Harper is doing. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I'll wake up and like, that's a great idea. And I come over here and scribble on my whiteboard and then go back and get in bed.
That makes sense. That's funny.
I obsess over what I do.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that a lot of people don't have or haven't found something that allows them to do that, or, aren't able to find that. So that's pretty cool to hear. Black Monk says that's just a self-employed mindset. He says he dreams about rosary beads. I was talking to him the other day about an idea I had for a rosary. Maybe we can get it done. Or he said he has to talk with the rest of the people over there to see if they can get it going. Well, thank you so much for talking with me. I really appreciate it. I mainly wanted to ask you.
I need a rosary that would befit Cole Harper.
There you go. All right, Nick, you have to listen. He just said that. So you gotta shoot him a possible idea, or Jeff's gotta have a certain idea. I'm curious what you think about mine. I had told Nick from Black Monk, I had said, I want a rosary with copper beads and a green, because he does the big thick paracord ones. And I said, and I want a green paracord, and then I want the copper to turn, there you go. Yeah. I said, I want the copper to turn green and I want it to match the paracord. And he said, I don't think anybody makes copper beads, but we'll have to look into that. And I thought that'd be the coolest thing, to let the copper age and turn green like the paracord. That's my idea. I'm curious what you think about that.
I mean, it's doable.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to walk around smelling like pennies all day.
Yeah, that's fair. I didn't think about that. Maybe I need something else. I just want something that's going to tarnish and age, which was funny because he was talking about how they special order stuff that's not going to tarnish. And I was like, no, that's not for me. I like boots. I like jeans. I like stuff that kind of ages a lot.
Yeah, my Benedictine metal on this one is getting a little bit of patina on it.
Yeah, there you go.
Starting to fade just a little bit. And my St. Michael rosary that's in my car, it's the replica of the battle bead World War I rosaries that they issued to the U.S. troops.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not going to patina anytime soon. It's like that gunmetal finish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those ones don't do it. The whatever, I don't know if they put something on it or if they do something to it, it really sticks around like that. But
yeah,
for me, there's nothing like.
Mostly they just use non-oxidizing alloys in any of the metals, and then you don't have to worry about it.
Dang, but then that just breaks my heart. Yeah,
make a rosary out of pennies, bro. Get a drill.
Yeah, there you go. It's not a bad idea. All right, well, I won't take you for too much longer. I really wanted to mainly ask you about the story stuff because I was really interested about that. I've heard some other people kind of talk to you about a lot more of the personal stuff, and thought maybe we could get something a little bit unique out of there. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, it was fun.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for watching. I'm going to be live again tomorrow. This is rare. I'm not planning on doing 2 in a row, but I'm talking with TR Sartorial. He is a gentleman who makes suits and dress shoes and stuff, and he's a Catholic guy. And he also was raided by the FBI for January 6th. So he should be an interesting conversation. Anyone who wants to check that out, same time tomorrow, 5 p.m. Have a good night, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. All right, ending the stream.